we were talking about how agents are being developed in a shadowy sort of way across enterprises. And I said, do you have a sense of how many you might have that, are ungoverned, unmonitored? He goes, yeah, about 20,000. And I went, I'm sorry, did you say, you didn't say 20, you said 2,000? He goes, nope. We think we have 20,000 agents running rampant across the enterprise from all kinds of different locations attached to all kinds of LLMs as background. And I was astonished. The bottom line is the corral is wide open. The horses are loose. We don't know what to do already.
Hey, my name is John Santaferraro, and this is The Digital Analyst, where AI makes sense and digital dominance begins.
The Digital Analyst with John Santaferraro, powered by Insight Jam.
I'm not going to do a long intro today because I want to get you straight to today's episode. My returning guest is Shawn Rogers, CEO of BARC USA. Shawn, along with the great Merv Adrian, just completed their second global research project on AI and AI adoption. The first was in 24 and the more recent at the end of 2025. It offers a unique perspective on what has happened over the last couple of years, and an even more unique perspective on what lies ahead. What makes this research so unique? In contrast to the inundation of 2026 predictions we have just suffered over the last month, this research provides the foundation for a more fact-based approach to understanding what might happen with AI in 2026 and beyond. So grab a glass of wine or a cup of coffee and join me on my Tuscan farm in the hills between Lucca and Florence for The Digital Analyst. A big digital welcome to Shawn Rogers. Shawn, it is so good to have you back on The Digital Analyst. Thanks for coming.
It's great to be back. It's been a while since we've had a chance to do this. It's good to kick off the new year.
It's good to kick off the new year with you. You were the very first Digital Analyst podcast. So it's awesome to have you back. If we keep doing this, at some point we will have spent more time doing podcasts together than we have spent historically in my wine cellar in Colorado.
We have a few more podcasts to do, John, before we find that intersection. But yeah, it's fun to be. I forgot number one the first time you did it. So congratulations on the success of the program. It's doing quite well.
Thank you very much. Well, I'm excited about today's topic. You and Merv Adrian have done this AI research at BARC twice now. And before we jump into it, I have these curiosities, because you've kind of lived this thing and produced it and talked about it. What was your biggest surprise about the results that you got?
Oh, there's a handful of them, and the best research always has surprises. If you don't get surprised by something, you didn't build a very good survey. So there's always things, and I know you and I've discussed the research a little bit, and at some point on the call today, I'd love to touch on this gap that exists around IT. I thought that was a really big one. I think one of the biggest things that surprised us is we did have an anticipation that we'd see more leaders arrive on the scene. And so part of this research is Merv and I have put a process together to define what leaders look like. And so we just assumed with the fast pace of AI that we'd see growth in this area, and it was pretty flat. And so I think what the respondents are sort of telling us is some companies are investing to build foundations that position them to be leaders, to move quicker, to deploy more projects, and so on. And about 80% of the companies have decided, no, we're not going to do that, and we're just going to chase AI and do what we can. So I'd say that was probably the biggest surprise. I assumed we'd see growth in leadership, and we did not. So
I wonder if some of that is because a lot of leaders, a lot of companies, not leaders, but people didn't really fully understand AI a couple of years ago. We're so much further along now, and we've seen so much project, but a lot of the directional things that were set in place in 2024 were still focused on generative AI primarily, and they hadn't really seen that for what it was. And today's understanding about what AI is and what companies can do with it and what can be done is so much more. Things are clearer now than they were in 2024.
Well, clearer now, certainly in comparison to when we did it. And I think, you both of us have a little gray in our beards. We've been around the block a few times. And I can clearly say without hesitation that I've never witnessed technology move like it's moving right now around this topic of AI, whether it's generative AI or agentic AI or what have you. This is the fastest pace of tech that I've witnessed. I made a joke a while back while I was giving a talk somewhere, and I said I was kind of angry that it was happening in the later part of my career versus the beginning of my career, because this would have been a fun wave to surf for 20 years. It's exciting, and it was fun and insightful for us to do somewhat of a longitudinal approach to a piece of research. So Merv and I did this first piece of research about 18 months ago and published it in 2024 in March, which is, 300 or 400 years in AI time. And it was really interesting to ask many of the same questions now that you've done projects, now that you've delivered things, what really happened. And that was the cornerstone of the insights for this research, was to learn some lessons, to understand what leaders who are out there in the forefront of things are doing differently than, I hate to say laggards, but the other 80% anyway. So
Yeah. So the biggest surprise is that there aren't more leaders, and probably that apparently AI is a lot more difficult to deploy than people have led to believe. It's not as easy as it looks. What was your most important finding? The most sort of valuable, important thing, especially for listeners.
I think that we saw a lot of shifting around the topic of responsible AI. And for everybody listening, responsible AI is the guidelines a company sets up internally. This is how we're going to approach utilization of this technology. And we're seeing that in a quite important way. It's shifting dramatically. And it's a little concerning. There's some things in responsible AI like bias of data, bias of models, control and privacy, compliance, really impactful topics that are shifting dramatically up and down. It is a little scary how many companies, some of you who are listening, you're ignoring really important things. And it's a little scary from where I said and from where, John, you said on this topic, because we would tell these companies that they need to prioritize things a little differently. So I certainly think that responsible AI is evolving, and new technologies continue to find their way into our research. Just as a interesting tidbit, we ask a question in the research about what kind of technology are you putting into your stack? What did you need? What did you go get? Well, when I did the first round of of this survey with Merv, the terminology MCP didn't even exist.
Uh,
And so I had to add it to the question again this time around, and data trust frameworks didn't really exist as a big talking point. Lineage and monitoring and observability of data were also sort of brand new, not to you and me because they've been in the stack, but applied to AI is kind of new right now. But it's funny. I mean, I said it's longitudinal in effect because I can't claim it's 100% because some of the questions had to evolve with how fast the evolution of the tech is. Adding new options to a question like MCP was required 18 months after we did the first piece of research. By the way, 20% of the respondents said that they are doing agentic projects with MCP. So 80% haven't gotten there yet. 20% are experimenting with it. But if you look at the tech news every day, you would think all of us are doing it. So,
right.
yeah.
Yeah. Let's jump back a minute to the responsible AI. What were some of the findings there? Some of the specifics.
Well, like I said, it's always in motion, which makes sense to me because as companies are learning more about the projects and the scope of the projects, they immediately start to reassess how they're attacking it internally. So, some of the big changes that we saw were around things that, frankly, I thought were pretty important. So, I'll give you a couple. In 24, 32% of the respondents that talked to us about responsible AI listed um, data privacy at near the top of what they were concerned about. When they started to deploy over the course of that 18 months, it jumped all the way out to 56% ranking it. And it came in as the number one concern around responsible AI. At the same time, oddly, 36% of respondents said, hey, human AI collaboration, or what we often call humans in the loop, that was ranked number one. That was a big concern for responsible AI 18 months ago. And it went from 36% of our respondents ranking it as number one in our research in 24. It dropped to 21. So what that kind of told us is that users are getting okay with certain types of automation. They don't think humans need to be in every loop. And you and I write about these topics all the time. And I think it's the speed of a process, the criticality, the risk of a process kind of dictates how much human interaction you really want to have. And I think that users are getting a little bit more comfortable doing AI or agentic AI without a lot of interaction from people. But at the bottom of the list, I mentioned already, data bias has dropped as a very, very low priority. At 8% of our respondents are prioritizing it. Model bias is at 6%. And oddly enough, a whole 5% of the respondents don't even have a responsible AI policy in place. So
Wow.
yeah,
Yeah.
wow. And our joke on these things is every year us analysts like to write stories about the horror stories of the year, the mistakes people made. And I would like to urge all of you listening to John and I today, don't be in our end of the year story this year. Have a little responsibility around AI and be careful about what you're doing. Otherwise, you're going to get exposed. So, yeah.
But great advice, and just to build on that, it's like if you are one of those companies where data bias and model bias doesn't matter to you and it's not important, that bring that up on the list. I mean, because it is a big issue, and bias exists in all data. Bias exists in all models, and it is up to us responsibly as corporations, as nonprofits, whoever we are, as individuals, even if we're going to use AI, to be able to find ways to control that bias.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And we've heard plenty of stories about biased data affecting outputs of AI. And I think that's a very hot topic. Being accurate, avoiding hallucinations, and being contextually sound in your AI practices, very important. So, yeah, we were a little stunned again to see those numbers so low. They were not super high in 24. But again, as a researcher, I thought, well, that'll go up now as people learn more. People have not learned enough to know that that has to be a higher priority.
Well, I was just briefed by a company that has a bias measurement built into their AI governance
Yeah.
application, and it operates in real time. So it's always looking at the data, it's always looking at the model. And I think that as AI governance becomes more productized, I think people will realize how incredibly important that is. Yeah, now all we can do is kind of wave our hands and warn people and say, please do something
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
that.
I,
Yeah.
I absolutely agree. I cringe when I see those. And I think part of it is that FOMO vibe, that fear of missing out, and the fact that AI initiatives are being driven from a board level, or at the very least, the very high executive level within most companies. And when you feel the pressure of the upper management or the board, you tend to race a little too quick. People who are not technologists are the ones that have FOMO the worst. They're like, well, we can't miss this. It's a great opportunity. Hurry, 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 go do some AI. And that's not always the best approach.
Mesh is a material built to be strong and flexible. Mesh is an interaction creating alignment and power. Mesh is a behavior that brings people together. And now Mesh is a new model of trust networks from InsightJam, driven by enterprise experts for professional decision makers who recognize the moment we are in, where the world of work collides with AI. The greatest mesh of all.
I want to go back to what you mentioned earlier, this concept of AI leaders, because I think everybody would like to be one of those, right? Nobody wants to be the other 80%, and certainly nobody wants to end up being identified as a lagger. There's not a whole lot of job security in that. So how did you define AI leaders, and what can our listeners learn from your research that might guide their path to leadership? Like I said, I think everybody wants to be a leader.
Yeah. So, I love this question because I think it's important. We did not ask, dear survey taker, are you a leader? So we're a little wiser than that in our approach. So Merv and I did a lot of research before we did our research, and I'll list the 7 areas that we look at, and I'm happy to dive into them. But identifying AI leadership or ownership in your organization is one of these foundational leadership core competencies. Added to that is AI program standards and policies. If you don't have a team putting programs and standards together, you're going to find yourself in a bad spot. Project governance and oversight. You mentioned governance already today. That's the third one in our kind of our group of priorities. Enterprise architecture requirements. If you're not standing back and looking at what you have and what you need and being strategic about that, you're going to have problems. Legal considerations is very interesting because people do sometimes make mistakes here, and legal should have a voice. If you're ignoring your legal team right now as you're doing AI, I would urge you not to. Security standards and compliance is our 6th sort of pillar here. And then data access and how to use data from a policy standpoint are the 7. So just because I didn't put up a slide, I'll run through them again. Identify your leadership, AI program standards, project governance and oversight, enterprise architecture, legal considerations, security standards and compliance, and data use and access. So, leaders for us in our research are companies that have already fully formalized policies on all 7, not 5, not 4, all 7. And if they haven't fully formalized, they are in their final review process to implementation. So that's what a leader is in the eyes of BARC research. We have used this question now in 4 different global pieces of research about AI. And our global research usually has between 300 and 500 global respondents. So it's good data. And the research that we're talking about today is data from September and October. So it's new data. And what we found is out of the 421 people that took our survey, the number had not changed very much from last year.
Huh.
It went from 21% of respondents who had done all 7, actually down to 19.5, which give or take in research means it's basically flat. So we expected that number to rise. It didn't, and it's starting to paint a picture that there's a group of companies that are going to make the investment to do a lot and build this foundation. And there's a majority of companies that haven't gotten there yet. So we'll see. I want to ask the question like every 90 days just to see if
Yeah.
it's percolating. But we see trends in the data. So, it's interesting. So companies, the respondents that come to us from the Office of Finance have a much better take on all 7 of these pillars, whereas the marketing group does not. So,
Yeah.
and that's, so when we start to dig into the data, we see that certain cuts of our respondents are attacking this differently. But the bottom line for everybody that's listening, about 19.5 to 20% of your peers, your competitors, have built a really solid foundation for AI. In our research this time around showed they're doing more projects. They're producing and deploying more AI than you are. So if you're in the 80% group, you're starting to fall behind on velocity and success of AI projects. Does that make sense from this leader laggard sort of standpoint?
Yeah, it definitely does. And it's interesting the distinction you made between the department that somebody works in, because your research also showed that one of the primary application areas, I think number two, was customer service, customer sat, right?
Yep.
So it is those and historically, as long as we've been doing this, the number one expense for data analytics and now AI has always been customer facing kinds of applications.
Yep.
And those are the people that tend to move faster, not concerned about the potential risks that they face without a sort of a robust AI organization in place to make things happen. It could even be shadow AI, right? It's not shadow IT because there's a lot of these applications it's shadow AI.
I had a conversation with the head of a global bank in the last 60 days, and we were talking about how to control the growth of agentic AI, right? And the word shadow AI popped up during this conversation, and we were talking about how agents are being developed in a shadowy sort of way across enterprises. And I said, do you have a sense of how many you might have that, are ungoverned, unmonitored? He goes, yeah, about 20,000. And I went, I'm sorry, did you say, you didn't say 20, you said 2,000? He goes, nope. We think we have 20,000 agents running rampant across the enterprise from all kinds of different locations attached to all kinds of LLMs as background. And I was astonished. I
Wow.
was absolutely, and he was very clear. He said, look, some of these agents are really small little code snippets sort of thing. But the bottom line is the corral is wide open. The horses are loose. We don't know what to do already. And the whole conversation we had with that bank that day was around how do we monitor, manage, optimize, retire agents that are not behaving correctly. It's a scary thing when FOMO and excitement about a new technology jumps past some of these foundational things about governance and so on. And so, and I want to make another point because you touched on it. You said use case from, customer stuff, right? Customer interaction engagement. Well, with customers comes highly interesting data, personal information, restricted information. If you're in healthcare, it might have HIPAA content in it. If you are not monitoring and don't have a good policy around how to access and utilize the data for AI, you will make it into the John and Shawn end of your haha story.
Wow. What is the benefit or ROI? Was there anything in your research that would help the listeners understand if you do put these things in place, if you become a leader, what are the benefits? What happens?
So you get projects that are a lot more successful for certain. ROI is very interesting, and we've seen a few attempts in the market to quantify ROI of
And
AI.
I'm sorry, I meant ROI and just in general. What are the
Yeah,
benefits? What's the goodness?
so I
We
wanted
don't
to
have
let
you don't have to do an ROI analysis, but just in
the
general,
ROI
what are the
analysis on use
bennies?
cases, it's very different by size of company and so on. We'll be doing some ROI research and publishing it in 2026 because I think we're at that point where companies want to understand what type of deployments carry higher immediate ROI, and I think that's killer. The standard stuff that you're seeing is that cost is becoming a factor. So for companies that have better foundations, they experience a bit of less of a cost. It's almost like a slap in the face. In 2024, we asked a question about challenges, and the leaders, that 20 or 19% that we had in 24, said, yeah, we're not really worried about hiring people or getting AI engineers or some of the standard stuff we were seeing. They said, we're really concerned about cost. And we trailed along on that theme into this year. And we're seeing leaders are experiencing better situations around cost. But at the same time, because they're deploying more, they're bumping into repeated challenges around it. So, is that a benefit? Well, the benefit is they already know what the 80% hasn't experienced yet. So one of the things BARC analysts tell end user customers all the time is if cost isn't on your radar, you're about to be surprised in a very uncomfortable manner. Your projects are going to run beyond budgets and so on. And even the numbers from this year, I think last year the cost number was around 24% of people being listing it as a top success metric for them. And that number jumped from 24 to 30 this year. So another 6% kind of awoke up to, hey, these are things that we need to consider to decide where we're getting the upside. Bottom line, customer satisfaction, cost, alignment to business functions, and user adoption are the top measures of success for companies. And later on in 2026, BARC will publish some work around actual quantification of ROI on certain types of leading projects.
My takeaway is it sounds like project success, more projects more successfully, which potentially will lead to this the ROI, because those things
Yeah.
can bring in a return on
Yeah.
investment. I like that. But this whole thing about cost, let's go back to that, because I saw that in your research, and you specifically asked people, how did each of these following costs impact your projects? And you listed a whole bunch. And the number one at 51%, not a surprise, software costs.
Yep.
Number three, people, salaries, and training. The one that sits in between there was a little bit of a surprise to me, but not. It's the cost of validation and quality control cost, 43%, which tells me that you actually are using AI in a lot of cases to increase productivity, but AI is not as perfect and doesn't have any quality control built in. So you have to go back, you're doing more work, and now you have to go back and figure out how to validate it and how to make sure that what is being done is actual quality. So it starts, if those are the cases, you begin to eliminate the return on investment.
100%. And if you look at the floating dots of data that come from research like this, so we already talked about responsible AI priorities, and we discussed the impact of data bias being really low quality data being at the bottom of people's internal prioritization of responsible AI. We have another finding, and we can talk more about it in a minute, about challenges. And the number one challenge that came out of this research for people deploying AI projects was data quality, which again, now we're back to that quality word again. And then we're here in what's impacting companies from a cost standpoint. And you're exactly right. The second highest response was validation and quality control costs. So companies are figuring out that one of the cornerstones of getting this work done has to do with quality of everything. And these processes need to be fixed or optimized in a way that that's taken into consideration, or you will lose your footing and you won't see the ROI that you expected. So, and this aligns with what the leaders told us way back in 24. They were like, cost is going to be a problem, and the costs are coming from everywhere. And you're right. I think we had 15 or 10 different costs questions in there that we asked, and security and privacy and cloud infrastructure and storage rounded out the top five of software costs and validation and so on. And so it's the cost problems are maturing, and we'll see that continue into 2026 with more deployments and more sophistication. And when you start factoring in these incredible workflows that people are building that are multi-agent driven workflows, people are going to get surprised. I mean, we're having John. I had a conversation with a company recently, and they said they told me the story that they didn't fully vet and test the quality of an agent, and it was like the Friday afternoon query story we used to hear back in the database and BI days, where Bob left his desk at 3:30 in the afternoon on Friday, and they got back to work on Monday and found out they spent 30 grand on a query.
Yeah.
We're starting to see the same thing
Yeah.
with agents that are running wild. And so, yeah, it's cost is going to be a big thing. And we wanted to figure out the cornerstone of the question was, what did you think was going to happen and what really happened? Again, with that lessons in place. So 45% of the respondents said software cost was about what they expected. But over half, as you said, 51% were surprised as they started deploying. So these surprises, and they're listed right here in the research. So you can download this particular piece of research for free. And I urge you to go ahead and do that at the BARC site. And I think we can share a link during our talk today. But go get this. This list, just this one chart, is extremely important for you to understand and to bring up in a meeting. Here's the cost things that are going to surprise us in 2026. So
unlock better leads with custom webinars by Solutions Review.
And welcome to the Solution Spotlight featuring Broadcom, Alteryx, IBM, Impetus, Infor, Sigma, Radware, Infinidat, Revenera.
Boost your brand with our exclusive virtual events featuring in-depth use cases, live product demos, and interactive Q&A sessions. All broadcast live to LinkedIn, YouTube, and Zoom, straight from our state-of-the-art production studio or on location at industry tech conferences. Get the full package: custom promotional graphics, polished video production, and our massive social media reach. Fill your sales funnel with high-quality targeted leads, and contact us today by visiting solutionsreview.com/virtual events.
Well, it's interesting because one of the most mature areas in the use of AI is coding, and there have been studies done on ROI for software engineering organizations. I've seen one of them in particular, and it is not showing any return on investment, even though so much is being gained in terms of productivity, and productivity is up, in a massive way. But the backlog of testing, as one came down, the backlog of all of the testing that needs to be done on all of this new code that is being developed and all of the quality control basically has eaten away all of the ROI. So these, even some of these software engineering organizations, and I use that example because it's a great example, because it's an area where AI has been used extensively already, and a lot of progress has been made, and they still haven't figured it out. So it's almost like maybe the prediction for 2026 is that by the end of the year, we'll be able to predict AI costs better than we did in the last 2 years.
I think that you're very right. And I also think that we're sort of standing on a bridge right now where the automation and expertise of AI-driven things like coding, for instance, has found a home in the enterprise. And a lot of people are using it, which frees up engineers to go do different things. But we're not really quantifying those different things yet, because they're getting pulled back into testing, vetting, confirming, spending a lot of time being in the humans in the loop of some of this automation. The maturity and the outputs of AI, I think, will help make that bridge easier to cross coming in 2026. And I think the other thing we're going to see is we're going to see a highly specialized view of models in general. So all of these mega models, these frontier foundation type models, will continue to be in our ecosystem, but we see the strategy around using domain level models or small models to cut into the cost factor, but also to add to accuracy and context, is becoming more and more important. Almost every vendor I speak to is touting their ability to let you bring your own special models into their environments to get what you need. So yeah, we're in this cool maturity arc of all of this. And it'll be interesting to see how many years it takes for us to find that smooth, like, okay, You can expect this kind of ROI. You can expect these kind of costs. Here's some good foundational things that you need to change in your environment to make sure that happens. I think the recipes will get easier as we go forward, but right now they're very chaotic.
You did in your research, and we've talked about a couple of these already, talk about barriers to success. And I think that's a good area for our listeners to understand, because there are some things that listeners can do to avoid the challenges before they occur if they understand what they are. What did your research uncover?
I'll go back to the leadership thing, the 7 groups, investment in those 7 groups and areas for your company to move those initiatives along is an absolute recommendation to anybody that's listening. You don't have to accomplish them all this month. And you might not be able to, but looking at that list of 7 and moving forward as fast as you can to be considered a leader in AI will give you all kinds of outputs. I think the other thing that we saw from a challenge standpoint was, and I touched on it a minute ago, around quality issues. So in 2024, we asked 335 global respondents, and we said, what do you expect the obstacles to success to be? And 19% of them said data quality is going to be a problem for us, and it landed like in the middle, John. It wasn't a forward outlier. It wasn't backwards where we thought, why is that so low? It was just sort of middle of the pack. The question this year was, now that you've deployed things, because by the way, our respondents to this research, most of the outputs we share are based on people who are leaders or people who have deployed. If you haven't deployed, we weren't really interested in your feedback because you have no lessons to teach us. Well, the lessons of people deploying, and perhaps one of the biggest nuggets you should take away is that 18 months ago, back in 2024, the respondents said, hey, 19% of us think it's going to be a problem around data quality. What happened is 44% of the people now say, oh boy, data quality. And it's not, I said this recently, it's not a sexy, fun chore to address. It never has been. And you and I have been in this industry for decades, and we have been talking about the importance of good data quality in the enterprise for what seems like 100 years. And I asked a room full of 50 people at a BARC event last year, and I said, I have a premise. Tell me if you think this is true. The impact of AI is so strong, it's finally going to make the enterprise slam on the brakes and address data quality. When the room was done laughing, we agreed. Unfortunately, most companies will only address the data quality that is centric to the project they're working on, and they don't always address it 100%. So when you and I talk again next year or later in your season, data quality will still be the number one challenge or obstacle. So if you haven't addressed it or aren't addressing it, and I mean, what's your view on that? I mean,
yeah, I wanted to go back to it. I know we had discussed it, but I wanted to go back to it because the issue for me around data quality is not just what has historically been structured data quality, but now it's a whole new paradigm to address quality issues on unstructured or semi-structured data. A lot of the data that is important to AI and generative AI especially sits in documents and in document management systems.
Yep.
And how do you get the metadata out of a document management system? Or if you don't have a document management system, how do you generate metadata to even things like, here are 10 different documents, which is the most up to date, which is the golden record, which of these policy booklets is the one that we are operating on right now, and if we have fed the old one into the model, how do we get it out of the model somehow? Well, you can't.
Exactly. You can't.
Now you got to see if you can figure out how to get it to understand. This is a whole different animal, Shawn. It's not. I think that's why it happened. When I saw it in the report, it's like, well, people always kind of think they have data quality under control because they've been working on it for 30 years.
Right.
Then they realized, oh my gosh, we have a brand new data quality issue and we don't have tools, we don't have expertise, we don't know what to do. So I think it could easily be one of those gotchas.
Yeah, well, I absolutely agree. And you and I've traveled enough road to understand it from the beginning. Back in my early days in the industry, we used to talk about the 80/20 rule of data, that only 20% of enterprise data was available to us to do BI, right? To report and to build dashboards off of, and how important it would be to get our hands on the other 80%. During the big data craze, we kind of got to most of the data. We were still struggling on data, maybe on IoT and at the edge of our environments and things like that. But overall, in general, the enterprise started using most of its data a handful of years ago. But for the AI uses and for the autonomy that tends to live in those applications, you're correct. It's not just the data, it's what we know about the data, the semantic layer of the data, the metadata of the data, the context of the data, and being able to have systems that understand what data's been introduced to LLMs. I think you're 100% on target. I'm playing with one on my desktop right now, and I fed it 15 pieces of BARC information just to test it, and I asked it BARC style questions about my own research in this model on local on my desktop, and it won't give me the answers. So then I asked it, how do I remove the data? And it didn't know how. So it's like, come on. So, but back in the day when we knew that the 20/80 rule was bad and getting our hands on the 80 was important, now we're back again understanding that something really truly innovative is happening. And I'll let you know, 74% of the people that are deploying projects have latched onto their structured row and column data. So that's not at all surprising. And 74% is higher than what was expected in 24. In 24, 61% ranked it as the number one data type. Unstructured and semi-structured data are on the rise in our research, and we know that that's going to cause more data quality issues as they're brought into these processes. So, yeah, we're back to that big question of, do you understand your data, and does your model understand your data?
Yeah. Awesome. I want to end with this, because you haven't talked about this, the gap between IT and business, and I'm going to see if I can combine it with another thing. If not, you can address two topics, right? But there's that, and then who do you partner with? And maybe my IT department is not my best partner to be able to succeed in with my AI project. Can you tell us a little bit about how you discovered that in your research?
Well, I touched on it when you asked me about big surprises in the research, because I have to say this insight around resources and who companies are partnering with to get the work done surprised us a lot. We were actually kind of stunned by the numbers. So the question that we asked is which of the following resources are you partnering with or relying on for primary roles in driving AI for you? So how are you getting the work done? And so we gave them a short list: internal IT resources, existing tech partners who they trust, new and innovative AI technology partners, and then global and regional consultants and partners. And we kind of figured that the highest number was going to be, well, we partner with IT, and that certainly was the case. In the end, in 24, I think 48% of the respondents said we're going to work with IT to do this, and it didn't seem especially insightful. But we asked the question this time around because we had gotten some new information, and it turned out that 54%, the number one partner for everybody trying to do AI, is IT. And my friend Merv Adrian had a great question, and he said we should ask them how satisfied they are.
Oh, I love it.
And I give Merv credit for that, because we were a little stunned to find out that the most satisfactory partner that companies are relying on, the one that they're not happy with, is internal IT. And where they found happiness or had a much higher level of satisfaction was with regional consulting experts that they had relationships with. And that was followed by global systems integrators and consultants, the big guys. And so, all of you that are out there doing AI, and if you're partnering with IT and you see that your frustration is growing, this is pretty normal. And we didn't see this coming until we got the data. The data shows that regional and GSIs are the place to go to move faster. And IT should probably still be in the mix, but they're not going to be or haven't been the best partner for everybody that we're speaking to. And I have also been able to tell from the data is as you do more projects, you let go more of IT. So you might begin in the beginning with your pal internal IT, but by the time you've got 10 or 15 projects underway of impact, sizable projects, you will find that you're working with IT a lot less and you're looking for outside scope of skill sets. So it was very interesting. And by the way, John, I know that you're based in Italy. The EU numbers on this question really showed
Oh, yeah.
reliance on regional expertise. So they were a higher level up than say North American respondents were.
Wow. Shawn, this has been fantastic. I don't know why I waited more than a year to have you back on the Digital Analysts. Thanks for coming back. Real quick, where can our listeners connect with you? What's the best way for them to connect and find the
Yeah.
information?
Thank you. BARC is at BARC.com, and you can get access to all of our content there and our analysts. And then I'm very active. I like LinkedIn to stay engaged with the community. And we, all of our analysts share a lot of information from BARC on our channels. And BARC has a very vibrant channel on LinkedIn, and I'm on it and active almost every day. So that's a great place to reach out and connect.
Thanks, Shawn. So great to have you. Thank you so much for joining the Digital Analyst. If you enjoyed today's content, do me a favor, right down below, like and subscribe to the InsightJam.com YouTube channel. You're joining a million others that are already there. There's hundreds, almost 1,000 different videos, great content on AI, other topics. Definitely go and connect with Inside Jam and Solutions Review. If you want to connect with me, best way to connect is LinkedIn. John Santaferraro, you'll find me there. Let's continue this conversation. And I will see you in 2 weeks on the Digital Analyst.
Powered by Insight Jam.